believe there's someone who's looking after me, someone beside me night and day to light the way. It's hard to conceive something you can't see, but I believe.
안녕하세요, all my beautiful people. Welcome to the alternate point of view. Welcome to everyone who is new, and welcome to everyone who is returning back to this channel. I so greatly appreciate every one of you. My name is Tracy Lee. Today is going to be a very special episode because this episode is going to take us all the way back to 1985 and 86. So buckle up if you were from that time. I was in middle school, but this was a time in the 80s when the number one songs were Madonna, Duran Duran, Careless Whisper by Wham, Money for Nothing by Dire Straits. It's when I think MTV first started. So also like the top cars, would you believe, was an Audi Sport Quattro, a BMW M3, a Lamborghini and Ferrari, Porsches. I mean, yeah, like those cars now are hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I imagine back then they were still pretty expensive, but not like they are now. So this is a time when, like, you know, you went out and you played till the streetlights came on and you didn't lock your doors and you had fun. And, you know, we didn't have cell phones and we didn't have the internet, and we were just enjoying life, right? And especially if you were an adult, right? You're just going out and having a good time, bar hopping, hanging out with your friends, and just living your life, right? That's what you did. So I'm taking you back to the 1980s into Wichita Falls, Texas. And Wichita Falls, Texas is not a very big place. It's not really like this grand area. It's a small town in Texas. It is kind of boring, not a lot to do. So basically you just go kind of bar hopping, you hang out, you spend time with your friends, and you are going to school. And I want to make sure that I do this video justice because this is more focusing on the victims. I don't want to talk about the killer in this episode because I have had the honor and pleasure of speaking with one of the victims' best friends. And she has allowed me this opportunity to speak about her best friend, Tony, who was a victim of a serial killer. And I want to honor each and every person the best that I can, because so often, and as I have been looking on the internet actually for pictures of the victims, it was really hard to find pictures without a picture of him. And it was really hard to find details without details of him. And it was really hard to find information that didn't have the information that he gave. So I was really honored to talk to Barbara, who oddly enough I met on TikTok, which, you know how I feel about TikTok. There's a lot of damaging things on TikTok, but there was also a lot of blessings that I found on TikTok, and she was one of them. And oddly enough, we both live in the same city. We both live in Austin. It's so crazy. We're like literally like 20 minutes from each other. It's nuts. But she has given me so much information about her best friend, Tony, who unfortunately lost her beautiful life, beautiful smile, just such a beautiful person inside and out. And that's what I want to talk about. I want to talk about the victims of this serial killer in Wichita Falls, which is a small area. And I want to talk about these ladies because they were all young. They were all, you know, very successful young women who were doing something in their lives that were in their minds, and probably if they had been able to live would have made a difference, and they would probably still be doing those things today. And so, or at least being able to enjoy being married and having grandkids and pass down their love for healthcare. Most of these women worked in healthcare. And I also want to talk about the after effects of losing someone in this manner and what it does to the family afterwards, because nothing good came of any of these situations. And Barbara actually fights. She's an advocate for people to not take plea deals, for the family members to not settle for plea deals. So I want to talk about each and every person of this Wichita Falls serial killer. If you would like to look up the serial killer, you certainly can. But I would like to talk about, first of all, I want to talk about the victims first, and I want to talk about more about Toni more in depth. I'm wearing blue, which was her favorite color. She also did like black, but she really liked blue. But I want to talk about, I don't want to talk about his stories of what he said happened in these situations, because you can look that up on the internet yourself. And you can tell, I will tell you what I know of the victims so far. I don't know much about, there were 5 in total that we know of. But I can't believe that there were only 5, because he was not captured until 1999. And these cases were from 1984 to 86. So I find it pretty impossible that he doesn't have more victims out there. So let's get into Terry Sims. Terry Sims was an EKG specialist. So she was working in the healthcare industry at Bethania Hospital in Wichita Falls. She was attending a nearby university, Midwestern State. And she was a co-worker of a young lady named Lisa Boone, who had finished working their evening shift at the hospital. And at approximately 11 p.m. On December 20th, 1984, when leaving for work, Sims, apparently, according to the internet, she went to a mutual friend's house to exchange Christmas gifts. And Sims was planning on spending the night at Boone's house on Bell Street in Wichita Falls. Boone was going to help Sims study for her final exam the following day. But Boone received an unexpected phone call to return to the hospital for work. So Sims was there alone in her residence. So she was left there, and she was basically, according to the internet, she was dropping off a key to her apartment at approximately 12:30. But apparently what happened was she heard something, according to what I believe Barbara told me. This was the situation with Terry, was that she looked out the window, and that is when this person saw her and realized that she must be alone. And he broke into the apartment, and he commenced to horrifically assault her and stab her and kill her. So Sims was just there. There was no rhyme or reason to what he did, but he didn't target her per se. She just happened to be there, and he happened to be there and noticed her and noticed that she was alone. And it was the next day when her friend found her in her apartment. So she wasn't even in her own apartment. She was just at her friend's house. And it could have been her friend if she weren't called into work. It could have been anyone. This guy had no MO per se. He just did whatever he wanted. And Terry was a nice girl. She was young. She was only 20 years old. So she was literally just starting her life. Being a radiology tech is what Barbara told me she was. The internet says she's an EKG specialist. Again, I'm not sure what the internet, where they get their information, but Barbara's been in touch with all of the family. Apparently, Terry knew one of the other victims, so you'll see all the connection with these victims as we go along. But Terry's family did not take this well, obviously. So I just want you to keep in mind she was only 20. She never even got to be old enough to go out and have a good time and drink and hang out with her friends and do any of those things and experience life and nothing. She was just at her friend's house. And it was Christmas, you guys. It was the holidays. And she didn't have a chance. So I just want to remember these young ladies, because there was no rhyme or reason to what happened. It was all unnecessary and all totally preventable. And the reason why I say all totally preventable is really maybe it was all totally preventable because this guy was on the radar for a while. And because after this incident, because he was on the radar, you'll see how all of these women connect, and you'll wonder why in the world the police didn't connect the dots sooner. But we go on, and we find out about Tony, which is Barbara's best friend. So the thing about Tony is she came from New Mexico. She went to school. She was a registered nurse. She was absolutely stunning, beautiful. She was prom queen, homecoming queen. She was a cheerleader. I know much more about her because she was Barbara's best friend in Wichita. And she was most beautiful in her school. And when you see pictures of her in this video, you'll understand why. And she was actually married for a short while. She was 23, so she got married young, but she married, honestly, as far as Barbara's concerned, the love of her life, but they were young. And so the marriage didn't last because they kind of clashed, Tony was very independent. She was a registered nurse. She was actually so smart. She already had her, her next level to being a nurse. She could have been a nurse practitioner if she wanted to be, but she actually wanted to be an ICU nurse. She didn't want to be a doctor, but she was very, very independent. She loved caring for people. She loved being a nurse. She had her BSN degree. So she was very, very smart. But a funny story that Barbara told me about how she and Tony became friends, because I'm like, how did you guys become friends? Tony's from New Mexico. You're from Texas. So how did you guys become friends? And she tells me this hilarious story, because this is funny how women bond, right? So they meet at a club up in Wichita, and they run into each other in the bathroom, and it turns out that Barbara is on a date with none other than Tony's ex-husband. And they start to talk about it, and they're giggling about it, and then they are making jokes with each other, and then they're like, you know what? I like you. And I like you too. So they ditch the husband, ex-husband, boy, date, whatever, and then they're just best friends and connected at the hip ever since. So these are two beautiful young ladies that are having the time of their life in Wichita Falls, and they hang out at this place called the Stardust, and it's just comical, the funny stuff that they did back then, because they were two beautiful women that would hang out whenever they could, as whenever Toni wasn't working, because she's a nurse, right? And they do this thing, this funny game with each other, where, because back then, like I said, they didn't have, cell phone numbers or pagers or whatever, anything like that. So guys would always go up to them and ask them out, and they would give their business cards. So they would have this contest with each other, where they would have it call it card night. And whoever had the most cards at the end of the night would have to buy that other girl breakfast at either, whatever the place was they go eat, IHOP, Awful Waffle, whatever it was they had in Wichita Falls, right? So it's just crazy to me, because everybody does it. Guys do it, girls do it, but that's funny. That's funny that they did that. And then Barbara talking about it, even looking back, was like, okay, this sounds kind of bad, but this is what we did. So they went to college together as well. So they were just connected at the hip. They borrow each other's clothes. They basically, they walked each other to each other's cars. They were besties. They did everything together. So they wanted to move to Dallas together. That was their plan, was to get out of Wichita Falls and move on to bigger and better things. And Dallas, they thought, was the place to be. That's what they wanted to do. So they wanted to get out of Wichita, get to Dallas, and they were planning on going as early as December. But they decided to go in May. They were like, we'll go in May. That's when we're going to go. So they go on, they keep hanging out. They're having a good time. The last night that Barbara remembers hanging out with Toni was at the place called the Stardust. It was on Thursday night, the night before she passed away. So I notice on TikTok a lot, you guys, everybody always does these little funny things on TikTok where they're like, what celebrity do you share a birthday with? Well, funny, crazy thing, Toni and I share a birthday. We are both Valentine babies. And what's really, really sad is that Toni disappeared on January 19th. She was only 5'1". She weighed 94 pounds, soaking wet. She's a little bitty thing. And she gets off of work, and she's driving her white Camaro that her dad bought her after her divorce from Jimmy. Jimmy had a black Porsche that she loved. And she gets off at the hospital. Now, if you hear the way the killer tells it, he says she picked him up because she worked with him at the hospital. Now, here's where you're going to hear all the connections. This hospital. He worked as an orderly at the hospital, and he claims that she picked him up. That is not true. She would have never picked him up. As a matter of fact, another coworker of hers followed her all the way to the light, and they split off because Toni's apartment was one way and the other girl's apartment was the other way. And literally, that is the last time anybody saw Toni. And she was literally up the road from that light, was her apartment. And at some point from the light to her apartment is the last place she was seen. So January 19th, she goes missing. This is on a Saturday, I believe, because she was supposed to be at work on Sunday. And Barbara tells me that she kept trying. She was begging Tony, call out of work for Sunday for Super Bowl party. Call out of work, call out of work, call out of work, call out of work. And Tony was like, I can't call out of work, because I've already called out for something else, and I can't call out again. I'll get in trouble. I'm an RN. I can't do that. And, you know, Barbara, of course, being Barbara and free-spirited, she was like, please call out, please call out, please call out. And Tony was like, no, I can't. So that is something that Barbara says bothers her. It's, you know, when I ask her, like, what are your, you know, I guess your coulda, woulda, shoulda, because everybody has that, you know, when you have someone that has been taken so violently, is you think about the things like what could have been done differently, what could have changed, what could have been different. Like, you know, what if, you know, like Jimmy is like, what if we hadn't divorced, you know, all those things, you know, the what if I could have just gotten her to go to that Super Bowl party? What if I could have just gotten her to call out of work? What if we had moved in December instead of waiting until May? Then she wouldn't have been missing in January. This wouldn't have happened. What if, you know, all of these things? There's always the what ifs, right? But she goes missing January 19th. They are searching and searching. 2 days after she has been discovered missing, her car is found within a few miles of the hospital. Some utility workers come along on February 15th, the day after her birthday, and they find her body in a field in the southwest corner of West Jenks Road and Highway 281 in another county, Archer County, which is only 1 mile south of Wichita County. So she would have been 24. So she was literally missing for almost a month before anyone found her. She had been assaulted. She had been stabbed multiple times. She had defensive wounds. She actually, apparently there was like an old school bus on this property, and apparently the assault and everything happened in that bus, and it appears that she survived and crawled her way to where she was found. So she was a strong little thing, and she fought for her life. Now this is winter, so, you know, she was abandoned and left there to die. But she fought. She fought hard. You know, there's all the, what if she was found a day earlier? What if, you know, I mean, all the things that people ask. But I asked Barbara, I said, what were you going to school for? Because she was going to school with Tony, and she said she was going to school for broadcasting. And Barbara does not do broadcasting. I asked her, you know, what made you change your idea of going to school for broadcasting? And she said, honestly, what made her change her view on broadcasting is that a reporter called Tony's mother. And this is exactly verbatim what the reporter said to Tony's mother. And she was a very famous reporter at the time in Wichita Falls. She and Oklahoma area, Texas, all up in that area. And she called Tony's mother, and she says to her mom, What is it like for you to know your daughter was found naked in a field, dead? Her mom didn't even know they had found her yet. That was the way she found out. Was this reporter calling her mom and saying the most crass thing of, how does it feel to know your daughter was found naked in a field, dead? You know, it's crazy to me that reporters want to get a story, or they want to get that reaction, but that was so mean and heartless. The woman just lost her daughter and she had no idea. Her daughter's been missing for almost a month and she didn't even have the common courtesy. Like, no one knew. There was still hope. You know, they still had hope. So, the sad part is that, again, you have Terry Sims, who was killed just a month earlier, actually, because she was killed in December. Tony's body was found in February. No one connected those dots. They were both assaulted and both stabbed. But they thought that Tony's killer was a guy who was stalking her because, I mean, keep in mind, she was very pretty. She had a lot of male suitors, a lot of guys who really wanted to be with her and date her and talk to her. She did have a guy that was kind of, you know, following her around, stalking her. So they thought it was him. Thought it was him to the point that they even took him to trial. Like, they were dead set on this guy. And he was found to be actually in a hung jury. They had no DNA to tie him because at that time, I mean, it's 1985, right? So they don't have DNA, things like that to bring these cases to full on, I guess you could say, fruition, because it's the 1980s. So they didn't have all of that. So they're trying to find whatever they can. They didn't have it. The jury was hung. So they ended up deadlocking, and he was released from custody. And since then, only one of the 12 jurors thought he was guilty. So it was really the prosecution just didn't have a case. And at the time, Barbara said they really did believe he was guilty because, I mean, when you're so riddled with sadness and anger and all of that, and you think they have someone, yes, you do believe that person is guilty. So when he was found in a hung jury, it was, a loss to the family. And Tony's family pretty much fell apart from there. Barbara fell apart. I mean, she lost her best friend. There were no answers. There was nothing. Tony's mom ended up dying of, I believe, cancer. If I'm not correct, Barbara will correct me. Her brothers ended up pretty much just throwing their lives away. One died of cancer. One has cancer now. Ended up divorcing his wife, has another wife, is not doing well at all. His father ended up marrying another woman who was like the evil stepmother. He could never accept the loss of his daughter. And he ended up, I believe, with Alzheimer's, and all he could think about was his daughter. And so he kept going into her room. They never changed her room. And he kept going into her room and looking for her. And so the evil stepmother threw everything out of Tony's, threw it all away because she was tired of hearing about it. And I think she was jealous because Tony engulfed everything and they couldn't get past the memory. And I mean, how could you? They lost a child. But because she was so jealous, she threw everything out and didn't even ask the brothers if they wanted anything. She didn't say anything. She just got rid of it all. So then, knowing that, when her father died, he wanted to be buried in the same cemetery with his wife and daughter, the evil stepmother cremated him. And so I think it's really sad that when people die, the worst come out of people. It's crazy how that happens. But losing Tony not only shattered her family and her friends, but her ex-husband, Jimmy, still to this day has found it hard to move on. I mean, he and Tony started a business. Not only was she a smart nurse and a caring nurse, and just, as Barbara says, that she was more beautiful inside than she was out. And, they always say, oh, this person, because I asked her that. I said, what would you say about her? Because people always make this comment, oh, they lit up a room. Oh, they were this, they were that. And she just said, Tony was more beautiful on the inside than on the outside, like so much more beautiful on the inside. And they just had so much fun. And she was just fun. And she was just such a caring and loving person. And she never talked about work, she never talked about her patients. She had one kid that she did talk about that, not major details, but she knew this one kid wasn't going to make it. He was in a motorcycle accident and she knew he wasn't going to make it. And that really, really bothered her. It really hit her hard. So, she knew he wasn't going to be okay, but she had to put on a strong front because she knew he wasn't going to be okay. And that hit her hard. But she cared about each and every one of her patients like they were part of her. So her husband and Tony, when they were together, actually, so funny when Barbara told me about it, I chuckled because I was like, oh my gosh, I hadn't thought about this in so long. But they had a waterbed company, a waterbed store. And yes, this is the 80s, keep in mind, okay? The 80s. Waterbeds were hot back then, y'all. But it eventually grew, okay? He grew it into like a mattress store and then a furniture store. So it's grown. So he has been very successful. But not only was Tony a great, loving, and caring nurse and friend and sister and daughter and wife, but she also was a businesswoman. So, I mean, the things that she was and the things that have been taken away from this world, you can only say that God has an angel that, I would venture to guess that she is one of the greeters at the pearly gates because she sounds as if she's absolutely amazing. So I love hearing about her. I love talking to Barbara about her. And I wish I knew more about the other women as well. Deborah Taylor, for instance. This is a even I don't want to say sadder, but this is also a very sad situation. Deborah Taylor was a mother and a wife in Wichita Falls. She was from Fort Worth, where she met that this actually happened in Fort Worth, not in Wichita Falls. The killer happened to be kind of passing through Fort Worth, and she and her husband Kent were at a bar in Fort Worth. Now, I don't know what Fort Worth was like back in the 80s, but I lived in Fort Worth for a short period of time, and Fort Worth is, okay, it ain't Dallas, okay? Just let me tell you that. It's a different kind of area. But she was at a bar with her husband. They were having a good time, but her husband wanted to leave, and she did not. She wasn't ready to go home because, I mean, she's a mom. She doesn't get out much, so she was like, I don't want to go home yet. And so the husband went ahead and went home, and she stayed out for just a little bit longer. And apparently the killer tried to make advances towards her when she was trying to leave, and she denied him the advances, and he did not like that. Therefore, he decided to smash her head up against a car and shove her in the car, and that is when he assaulted her and killed her as well. And this was a very violent death. And what's sad about this situation is not just that a mother and wife was taken away, but what the after that happened was that the husband was blamed. The husband was called a murderer, even though he passed 3 polygraph tests. He lost his job. He lost his friends. Her family turned on him. He lost everything. Everything. He has been labeled a murderer all this time, up until the real killer was actually caught. And he's never received an apology, never been able to put his life back together. He has been living under the shadow of the title of a murderer to his wife, who he loved, and they never had any domestic violence issues. They never had any issues whatsoever, ever. She was only 25. They were a young married couple with a baby. She was violently and brutally murdered. How would you go from not having any issues at all to suddenly now you're a murderer of your wife? A violent murderer at that? That just does, I mean, and they never ever said, oh, we totally screwed up. Totally screwed up. They've never done that. He literally lost everything. He's never been able to get his life back and put his life back together. He lost his wife, the mother of his child. And he probably thinks every day, I never should have left her there. So there's always thoughts like, what could have been done differently? And he not only has to live with that regret, but he has to live with under this dark shadow, dark cloud of how her family turned on him, the loss of his life as he knew it. And I don't even know if he was able to keep his daughter, because his family, her family, you know, he was labeled a murderer. He was you know, I don't know if they took him to trial all the way, but I know that everything changed for him, and it is really, really sad. So then we get to, and now that happened in 1985 as well, which happened in I think March 24th of 1985. So you have 84 for Terry Sims in December. You have January 85. And then just a couple of months later, you have Deborah Taylor. And then you have Ellen Blau a few months later in 85. And Ellen Blau was abducted in Wichita Falls. She was also going to Midwestern State. She was apparently walking alone to her vehicle, and she was a waitress. So, but she was a student. So everyone has something in common. All of these girls, except for Deborah Taylor, were all students. They're all in their 20s. She is taken. She's abducted. She is going to her car. She is also found later after she has been assaulted and beaten and stabbed. And again, this is in Wichita Falls. And her body is found almost a month later in October. And nobody has put any of this together, right? Nobody's put any of this together. And her parents died of obviously broken hearts because they died back to back. She was in such advanced decomposition that it was hard to identify her body. They had to do it by dental records. And they couldn't really tell if she had been sexually assaulted, but they did find that her underwear were pulled down. So they weren't able to get any real analysis off of her body. She was so decomposed. But she was a student and she was working as a waitress while she was going to school. And this is just, it's unimaginable to me how these police didn't figure out that, wait a minute, okay, all Midwestern students, all sexually assaulted, all abducted, what? How do you not connect those dots? Then, the next year, in May of 1986, we have another girl who's 21, who is Tina Kimbrough. And she's a waitress. She had recently befriended, guess who? This man that lived in the same building that she did. Now, again, how do you not connect these dots is what I'm wondering, but they didn't. But she had been in her apartment and she was suffocated with a pillowcase, according to him. And she was found a few days later when he actually called the police from somewhere else saying that there was a body in that building. She was only 21. And again, no one put the dots together that this person worked in the same hospital as Tony, lived in the same building as Tina. All of these girls had some sort of connection by going to the same university, except for Deborah Taylor, because that was in another city. But all of these girls lived in Wichita Falls. The problem was they lived in possibly different counties because, the county lines are kind of crossed over. But no one thought that there might be a same person. So his excuse for killing Tina was that she reminded him of his ex-wife. So Um, it's just, again, crazy to me as I talk to Barbara about the aftermath of these beautiful, beautiful women that were taken from their families, from their loved ones, their friends, their futures, everything that, you know, that the police did not connect the dots. They didn't communicate with each other, that they didn't see, like, hey, this is going on. And that it took them until 1999 when DNA was able to finally connect something. And I just find it very hard to believe that from 1986 to 1999 that he has not done anything since then. But again, if you want to look up, you know, the person, the killer, that's fine. But I don't want to say his name. I don't want to mention him. I just want to talk about these beautiful women. And I know more about Tony because I've been talking to Barbara. And I know that she was a very independent woman. She may have been young. She may have been 23, 24 by the time they found her. Would have been 24. You know, Barbara says she truly believes that Tony and Jimmy would have gotten back together because at the end of the day, they still loved each other very much. The timing was just off. I think that Tony wanted to experience a little bit of life before she really, really settled down. But Tony did want kids. She did want a family. But she did want to see her own way. And she was just having fun, being young, being wild and free. And, you know, enjoying not being in New Mexico, but being in a whole other state. And actually her brothers lived in Wichita Falls. So she was close to her brothers. And I think that's another reason why her brothers had such a hard time. And Barbara says she thinks one of her brothers could have possibly died from an OD. But the family was never the same since. None of these families were ever the same since. And I'm sure a lot of us have seen death in our families or we've lost a loved one, but to lose a loved one in such a brutal way is quite damaging, is quite traumatic. And I commend Barbara for fighting against this person to stay in prison. I commend her for, you know, fighting to get him finally, you know, executed. We've been paying Texas been paying for this man to be on death row for 39 years, and he's still not been put to death. I don't understand that. I can't fathom that. And I commend Barbara for helping other victims to not settle for plea deals, if at all possible, because, you know, when things don't go to trial and you don't get that jury, which I say all the time, I would never trust my life in the hands of 12 strangers because jurors, honestly, I don't think they understand the law or the rules of law or the definition that the judge gives them, because I feel like they are not getting what these verdicts are supposed to mean or what the punishment means. So I just find it strange. So I will leave you with Tony's favorite song at the time was by Journey. And it was I Can't Fight This Feeling. If you don't know that song, I'm sorry, by REO Speedwagon. Oh my gosh. By REO Speedwagon. I can't fight this feeling anymore. I'm not a singer, but she also loved George Strait. So at the end of this video, I'm doing a montage of all of these beautiful ladies and George Strait. And I want you to know, and please, please, when you pray at night, when you think about your loved ones, please remember it could be anybody. It could be you. It could be any one of us. We are not living in, and this happened in the 80s, you guys. So we're in 2024. Crazy things are happening. So keep in mind that someone is going through something. But these beautiful women that had bright futures and were living bright futures and had loving families lost their lives in a horrific way, but their light and their presence outshines the way they were taken. Just so you know that. I want you to know that. Deborah Taylor was a beautiful single mother and a wonderful wife. Ellen Blau was a college student who was trying to do better for herself. Tina Kimbrough was trying to do better for herself. She was a young waitress. Terry Sims was a radiology tech going to college. Tony Gibbs was a freaking RN. Do you know how hard it is to become an RN? And she was gorgeous inside and out. And she was successful. And I just want everyone to make sure that everyone remembers each and every one of these women as the wonderful, wonderful human beings that they were, the young human beings that they were, because their lives were taken far too soon. And it's just not fair. So please be sure that you like, subscribe, and share this channel. I hope you enjoyed this video. I know it was really long, but I wanted to be sure that we respected all of these beautiful souls, these beautiful women, and understood that they were people and they existed and they mattered and they matter. And I really mean it when I say, when I searched on the internet and when I looked up their names, it was really, really hard to find anything without finding information more about him than these beautiful women. So I'm very thankful to Barbara for sharing with me her story about Tony. And I really am thankful that I was able to learn Tony's favorite color and her favorite car and her favorite song and her favorite things, and just knowing the person that she was, and that her personality and her soul matched and outshines even the beauty of her on the outside. And I could feel, talking to Barbara, how much she still to this day misses and loves Tony just as much, and sharing the stories of Tony, like the card game, it's a memory that she'll always have. But I know it's something that she wishes she could laugh with Tony about today. So I know this video is long, but it's something that is meant to cherish and memorialize people who don't get to be talked about and memorialized and remembered, and their names don't get brought up enough because this world is too focused on the wrong side of the story. So I hope that you appreciate that. I hope that you took the time to listen and follow this through. And I thank you very much for watching this channel, and I appreciate you all. Please like, subscribe, and share. Kamsahamnida. I appreciate you all very much.